Mwah. We love you guys. We are so glad you're with us tonight. Tonight, we are going to have a conversation about something that we all experience. But again, we want you to frame it from a different perspective. The episode is called Thank You Rejection. And why would you say thank you? Hi, thanks for everybody coming in. When you guys come in, please tell us where you are coming in from, because we want to know you and we want you to know us as well. So please tell us where you're coming in from. But tonight, our episode is about
An odd term when you think about rejection as something that in a positive aspect, but it can be positive, and that's what we're going to share with you guys tonight. Because when you think about it as I've been rejected, whether it was by someone or for something that we're going to get into tonight, it's going to be, hopefully we'll give you a different way to frame it or even to look at it. Because when you look at it from a different perspective, it will give you a different mindset. And that's what's really, I think the most important thing is the mindset that you have when it comes to rejection.
I think it's important, just if you're watching now or in the future, have you ever been rejected?
I think everybody's been rejected when it comes to, if you've been with us, we're always trying to bring things from a relationship perspective. So when you think about it, whether you're dating or even when you've been with someone for a long time, or even if you're married, you're still gonna experience a form of rejection. It may not be intentional, but it's gonna happen. And when it happens, you have to know what is the strategy and how I deal with it. Because I think the closer you are to the person that you are in relationship with, the deeper that the rejection is gonna go. And when it goes to a deep level, it can do some damage to you emotionally, mentally, physically, that we're gonna talk about tonight from a relationship perspective, that you're gonna have to really frame it or even think about it from a different aspect.
I'm gonna use, we always talk about it from the perspective of relationship, but I think something that everyone can relate to is, have you ever applied for a job, or like for us, we're in the media. We shared this week that we were on the cover of LV magazine, and I was so excited, and I love them. They believed in us when we were just starting out, really small. No one knew who we were, and so LV magazine, they believed in us. They invested in us. They let us share our story in their magazine, and so we're on the cover of their magazine. But do you know how many press releases? Because Gil asked me, do you even know how many? We have probably sent out thousands. I would say probably at least about 10,000 press releases we've sent out to get our story out there and to share our message with people. But the people that are on our website, if you look on our website, we show as seen on all the places we've been. So the places that have supported us are the people that we support. We put their information out there. We put their logo. We talk about them. We make videos for them. But the people that reject us, guess what? We don't talk about them. And I think from the perspective of a job or a magazine, it's easy to let go or not to think about or give attention to the person that rejected you. But it's different when it's a person, or it's a career, or it's someone close to you. And so I think that it's important for us to understand. And for me, I went on a trip. We're both from Detroit, and I went on a trip to Detroit, and it was the first time I ever went home, and I didn't let everybody know I was there. I was just there speaking. And I can honestly say that during that trip, the Lord really gave me a real good view about rejection. And the thing that he showed me was that while people are not replaceable, they are interchangeable. And I think sometimes when we're rejected or we experience rejection, we take it to heart and we start to question, oh, am I valuable? Am I special? Am I enough? And the thing that the Lord showed me was, just like we were talking, Gil and I, we always laugh about it, just because you don't like chocolate ice cream, it does not mean chocolate ice cream is not good. So the thing that the Lord helped me with that is, rejection is more about preference and not your value. Just because someone does not select you, it does not mean that you're not valuable or important or special. You're just not their flavor. And so it helped me to kind of stop looking at it from the perspective of I wasn't enough to just we weren't each other's flavor.
It's important when you think about it as I wasn't enough and do some self-assessment. Anybody who's worked with us or even watched us, we talk about self-assessment a lot. And there's a reason behind it, because when you do some self-actualization and self-assessment on yourself, you probably are going to be maybe a little bit more critical than you could be, than you should be, because it's maybe not as bad as you may think, especially when it comes from someone else, because that person doesn't validate you. That person they can't validate you, because you were created in God's image, and he knew and formed you and shaped you from before you were even in a physical form. So he knew exactly how you were going to turn out, and you are definitely accepted. You are definitely good enough.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if someone doesn't prefer you or chose you or select you from their perspective, because you think about it, they're going to use a standard that they have devised or came up with that fits them. If you don't measure up to their standard, it does not mean that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
It means you were just not their flavor.
And
just
that helped me. And I think as women, because we take things so to heart, and we allow what other people think about us to become the frame in which we see ourselves. And that was just the beginning of God beginning to show me, because for me, my self-esteem was an issue for so many years. And so over the process of life, God keeps reminding me, you are more than enough. Stop taking on, just like if someone would offer you a meal and you're like, oh no thank you, I don't like that. When people say and do things that go against who you are, and they're trying to diminish your value, you could say no thank you. It's like, no thank you, I don't want that.
Right.
And that's I think a part of, rather than being upset or angry or taking it to root, I think you should allow yourself to, like you said, examine it and think about, well, what am I adding value? What am I doing? Am I making myself available? But not to the point where you start to question your own character.
Right.
I think you should examine yourself, but you should give yourself the grace and the kindness that you give to other people.
You have to acknowledge that it is an emotional pain that happens when you are rejected, whether it's by a person, by a job, by a career, or any other measure that a group, that's a good one, that they can when I say acknowledge it, I'm talking about acknowledge the emotion that it hurts.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that it's factual, but we are humans. It's just a part of the human condition. They talk about when you feel rejection, it is a part of your human DNA. It's just who you are, that to be acceptance and belonging in a group. And when you don't have that, it goes back to where you feel like if you're not a part of the group, all the way back, we don't believe in the evolution, even though we have gotten smarter. We don't believe in it from a scientific perspective, that we're constantly growing into something, that we started climbing trees and walking on trees and looking like a primate or anything like that. I don't believe that. But from a evolutionary perspective, as far as a group and a sense of belonging that you have, that is a part of what you have as a human, that you just have that sense that you need. And when you don't get it, it starts to giving you a perspective of second guessing the value that you have, or even, am I going to survive, not even just in this life, but just in this relationship?
And I think one of the things that you would think it would be natural that when you are rejected is to isolate yourself. But that's one of the worst things you can do. And you have to do the opposite. When you feel rejected, you have to first spend some time with God and yourself and say, hey, what's going on with this? Maybe we've grown different directions. And in a marriage, it's different. But I think so many times we experience rejection every single day. And if we don't develop a way to navigate it, it can really tear you down.
Right. It even gives you an opportunity to gain some perspective. If you think about it, if you've been rejected for something or gain some perspective about it, I can use something that happened to me as an example. I wasn't rejected by this one. I was actually, when I was in college and I was actually taking a test, and this came to my mind as we were talking and preparing for this, I failed a class 3 times. While that is all on me, I felt rejected. It's the same feeling that I had by this test. I know that may sound crazy, But I actually associated with that. I was like, why am I not good enough to pass this test? What am I missing? I had studied and I had prepared and I did as much as I physically thought I could do. And I just could not get over this hurdle. So I had to do some perspective checking on myself to say, okay, let me think about this. Because it felt like rejection. So I had to say, let me see, what can I do better? What can I do differently? Even so, I wasn't rejected by a person. I wasn't rejected by the school or anything like that. It was an inanimate object that I felt the same feeling of being rejected by, that I wasn't good enough to overcome this test. So I actually 3 times. And I'm not saying
babe, it's okay.
Oh my gosh, I was devastated, y'all. I was like, oh my God, I'm just done.
I said it's not because you're not smart.
See, and this is a part of the whole thing that you start doing.
Begin to say
your
about
self-talk.
Yes.
Your self-talk. I was like, I'm dumb. Why am I just dumb? I just can't get this. And you'll be surprised at how that starts tearing you down. It's not even coming from another person.
It's from you.
We do a job on ourselves and our perspective about who we are as individuals, to the point to where I felt like I couldn't recover. I felt like I should just drop out. It was my last class too.
I was like, no.
Yeah, it was my last class too, and I just could not get over this thing. But I finally did, and I accomplished it and got over it. But it was definitely after I did some perspective checking, and I looked at myself and said, okay, you are good enough. You are smart enough. You can do this. You got the knowledge. You done passed all these other classes. You can do this.
Right.
And I finally said, yeah. You know, it's so just like I can be down on myself in talking because I felt rejected or I wasn't accepted. I said, you know what? I'm going to do the flip side of that. I'm going to do the polar opposite, which is I'm start believing and saying positive things and positive affirmations about who I was as an individual, to say, you know what? I am smart enough. I am good enough. I can accomplish this. I can do this.
Maybe I need to change the way I'm studying. Maybe I need to change the time I'm studying. Maybe I need to change, do it in the morning or at night. Sometimes we need to make some adjustments in the way we're approaching something. And the reason why is thank you rejection, because rejection is protection. Something else the rejection shows you is that it shows you who is for you and who is not for you. And I think sometimes rejection, it keeps you from wasting your time, because sometimes people won't tell you how they feel, but they will show you. And so when someone is rejecting you, it's not because you're not good enough. You just may not be compatible. You may not have the same goals. You may not have the same dreams. You may not have the same purpose. And so I think it's important that we see rejection as, wow, that door being closed made me go a different direction. Or that person, because the way me and Gil ended up together was because the girl that he liked or loved or whatever, they broke up. And so her loss was my gain. And so rejection for everything that happens to us that's negative, it has the ability to help us to, 1, get closer to God, 2, have a better understanding of ourselves, and it makes you resilient.
Yes. And also even thinking about what you were just talking about, when you have support, when you have gone through a feeling of rejection, when you have experienced those feelings that I was talking about, just like where Renee was that support for me, in the sense of, even though it was just only a test that I failed, I mean, there have been jobs and all those other things that I felt I've had rejection about, that I had a support system.
Yeah.
Somebody who believes in you, somebody who is encouraging, somebody who has your back. And even if you don't have that person or that support system in your life, you can always reach out to us.
Yeah, we're here. We love you.
We'll reach out to
you.
Yeah, we'll tell you. And even if it's a point of getting to know each other, that's still a part of positive affirmation, that you just need to know that nobody's by themselves. I love the church that we attend, because it's not uncommon, and I'm sure a lot of other churches do this, is you have a support system in a group. We encourage, and just like this is a group. You are a part of this group, and we thank you for spending and investing some of your time just to hang out with us. And for those of you who reached out, and we will respond. Whether it's through a phone call, an email, a comment, or whatever, regardless of how many thousands of people have watched the videos and reached out, we will respond.
Yeah.
It may take a little bit of time, but we
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
because you do have a support system around you. So sometimes you have to seek that solace and that positive affirmation, even if you have a lot of negativity around you.
Right.
You may have to isolate yourself around that and change your environment.
Right. And I think I think that isolation, there are times of reflection and being quiet before the Lord is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But when your rejection pushes you further away from people, it's dangerous. It's important. You get to really find out who people are when things are going bad. Because if you're feeling bad about yourself and the people around you are feeding into you feeling bad about yourself, then that's not a healthy environment to be in.
Right.
Because if someone's going to kick you when you're down, then they're probably kicking you when you're up too.
Mm-hmm.
So a part of it, I think that God allows us to go through things to help us to realize who the people are around us and in our circle, and who we are and who He is. Because I think that we learn we make our biggest gains in our greatest losses. We have our greatest sense of strength after we've gone through some things. And so I think, unfortunately, sometimes in this day and age, people want to test with no testimony. They want to overcome without any difficulty. They want to be at the top, but never go to the bottom. You have to understand that rejection is a healthy part of being in relationships. It's a healthy part of being a human being. And when you see it as the things that rejection protected you from, it helps you to say, man, I'm thankful for that.
So talk about that part, because this is something that we get asked, I think, quite frequently about when you have experienced rejection in your relationships. If you, whether it's your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, dating, and all those things where you're going through and you experience a level of rejection where how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? That's a question that we get a lot. And it comes back to, we believe, it starts with you. It starts with self-care. Mm-hmm. It starts with you looking at yourself and saying, you know what? Even though you've experienced a level of rejection in your relationship, it's weird that you call it thank you rejection, because sometimes you are going to be your best cheerleader.
Yeah.
You're going to be the only one in your own corner sometimes, where you have to say, you know what? I have to protect myself in this environment. I have to protect myself in this situation, because you give and give and give so much in your relationships that when you feel some level of rejection by those intimate and close people to you, it goes deep. And when you do that, you have to pull back, not away and not isolate yourself. Right. I'm not talking about to that extreme.
Yeah, just have some time to heal.
I'm talking about some time to heal and some time to do and practice some self-care.
Right.
That's what we talk about. Whether it's going to the spa and getting a massage, nails, feet, whatever your thing is,
or just being on the riding lawnmower,
whatever it is, you have to practice that form of self-care, and you have to know that that is important to you. Getting over the rejection, getting over that thing that hurt you. And sometimes it goes deep, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and that's okay. But you have to know and acknowledge it, that it actually happened and it hurt.
And I think that when it's someone you're in a relationship with, someone that you're close to, one of the things that was like baffled my mind was when the Lord showed me that betrayal can only happen if it's somebody close to you. So a part of being in relationships means we're going to get hurt. And so if you expect, one of the things, and Claudette taught me this, she said, I'm going to hurt you and you're going to hurt me, and we're going to talk about it and we're going to forgive each other.
Right.
So to expect to never be hurt or disappointed or to experience rejection, I think about when we were, I think about, this is when we were teenagers. I remember I was spending the night at Gil's house because it was snowing. His mom was like, "It's snowing, you can't go home. You spend the night."
See, it wasn't what y'all thought. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. So I was in the basement in the shower, and he came and tried to get in the shower with me, and I was like, "Oh, no, I would be that girl." And so no, and so
that was rejection.
That was rejection. I said
Ouch.
no. But it wasn't because I didn't want him or desire him. It's because I thought about the consequences of that decision. And so sometimes rejection is not necessarily about you, it's more about the other person. And so I think that when we stop taking everything so personal and when we extend grace and empathy, sometimes people do things to you and it really, when people are hurt, they're going to hurt you. And so I'm not saying that we should be a punching bag or we should be a welcome mat. I'm saying that we have to learn how to navigate every part of life, not just the highs, not just the successes, and not just the wins, and not just the acceptance. We have to also understand that for every one time you get accepted, you have probably gotten rejected 500 times. And so when you look at life that way, it helps you to go through life understanding that, okay, I'm gonna have ups and downs and highs and lows, and people that are gonna accept me and people that are gonna reject me, and people that have rejected me in the past that might decide that they want to re-enter into my life. So a part of being in relationships means we're gonna get hurt. And so if you expect, one of the things, and Claudette taught me this, she said, I'm gonna hurt you and you're gonna hurt me, and we're gonna talk about it and we're gonna forgive each other.
Right.
So to expect to never be hurt or disappointed or to experience rejection, I think about I think about this is when we were teenagers. I remember I was spending the night at Gil's house because it was snowing. His mom was like, "It's snowing, you can't go home. You spend the night."
See, it wasn't what y'all thought. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. So I was in the basement in the shower, and he came and tried to get in the shower with me, and I was like, "Oh, no, I would be that girl." And so
that was rejection.
That was rejection. I said
Ouch.
no, but it wasn't because I didn't want him or desire him. It's because I thought about the consequences of that decision. And so sometimes rejection is not necessarily about you, it's more about the other person. And so I think that when we stop taking everything so personal and when we extend grace and empathy, sometimes people do things to you and it really, when people are hurt, they're going to hurt you. And so I'm not saying that we should be a punching bag or we should be a welcome mat. I'm saying that we have to learn how to navigate every part of life, not just the highs, not just the successes, and not just the wins, and not just the acceptance. We have to also understand that for every one time you get accepted, you have probably gotten rejected 500 times. And so when you look at life that way, it helps you to go through life understanding that, okay, I'm gonna have ups and downs and highs and lows, and people that are gonna accept me and people that are gonna reject me, and people that have rejected me in the past that might decide that they want to re-enter into my life. And so those are the kind of things you have to think about it. One of the things, in the show notes, I put some scriptures in there for you to look at, and there's some, we're going to talk about some calls to action. But I think it's important that we understand that everything that God allows us to go through, He's working things out for our good. And sometimes in order to work things out for our good, we got to go through some difficulty and some bad things and some things that make us feel uncomfortable.
And you said something just now that resonated with me. And while we just gave you an example of me trying to go in the shower with her and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole nother conversation. I want to clarify that. But you have to, this is one of the takeaways. This is one of the call to actions that you can do. And when you've experienced rejection and it seems to be a reoccurring thing, set boundaries. Set some boundaries, not only for that person you're in relationship with. If you're experiencing rejection continuously from this person as a habit,
right?
That's when you need to set boundaries.
And the thing that I love that the Lord taught me about boundaries is that boundaries are an inward swinging door. Boundaries keep me in. It's not to keep other people out. Because again, self-control is the only control God gives us. So boundaries are for me to tell me when to say no, and to tell me when to stop, and to tell me when to let people go. That's something that we have to look at, because if you look at the boundary as keeping people out, then that's still you trying to control them. Boundaries swing inward. I'm going to control me. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that's enough.
And when you do establish those boundaries, you have to be committed enough to adhere to them.
And respect yourself enough.
Sometimes we tend to fall back into the familiar. When you fall back into the familiar because it's comfortable and because you're being challenged, whether it's from rejection or just in everyday life, you have to guard against that. You have to guard and tell yourself, you know what, I'm not going to fall back into my old habits because they were not being productive
They
for
weren't
me.
healthy.
I have to look at myself and say, you know what, we don't do that anymore.
Right.
We have to do something different if you want to have a different result.
And I remember when I first got saved, one of my favorite scriptures, may the words of your mouth and the meditation of your heart be pleasing in your sight. And because I told y'all before, I came from a cussing family.
She didn't.
and one of the things the Lord, he was like, we don't talk like that anymore. We don't say that anymore. We don't do that anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. We don't do that anymore. And so there's that. Just like you can have negative talk to yourself, you can also have positive talk to yourself. So you have got to talk to yourself and speak to yourself, because again, it goes back to you're responsible for how you treat people, not for how they treat you.
We're in a time now where people's self-esteem is really, really low.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. And there's nothing, whether you're flipping channels or you're watching videos outside of us, because we try to be encouraging.
Yeah.
But if you're watching some other videos and you're looking at drama and things that are like, people can be mean, and that doesn't build you up. That's always going to be a form of rejection. But there is going to be, it's almost like our society is in a state of tearing people down to the point to where,
like it's a sport.
You feel rejected.
Or a game.
You'll start feeling rejected just by waking up. You wake up, and before you even get out of bed, it's things that are coming at you to the point to where you're like, oh my God, I'm already starting from the negative perspective before I even go out into my normal everyday life. One of the things that you can do in that aspect is to maintain a growth mindset. Yeah. We did a video or a podcast on this maybe a year or so, maybe a little bit longer, and it was probably one of our better, more popular ones. And it's really talking about the growth mindset. It kind of goes back into the self-care. You have to tell yourself certain things. But just like with a growth mindset, you have to be positive that you are constantly surrounding yourself with things that are building you up, as opposed to looking at things that it may not be directed at you. But if you're bringing all this negative energy, as people call it today, but negative connotations towards you, it's going to start getting into your mindset.
Because the Bible said faith comes by hearing. And so what you hear consistently, you will begin to believe. And so you have to be careful that you guard what you watch, what you listen to, and the people you're listening to. Because I did a video the other day. Why is everybody so mad and angry and on edge? And I think it goes back to we live in a time where people have rejected having a relationship with God, and they don't see the value of having a relationship with God. But God gives me something I can't get anywhere, and that's peace and joy and love. And so I think that we have to, as believers, as people who are followers of Christ, we have to represent him in a way where people are like, I want some of that. Not, oh my gosh, because religion doesn't help people. I think that in even for those of you who've been hurt by the church, I want to say I'm sorry. I want to say that that's not who God is. If someone at church has hurt you physically, emotionally, or spiritually, that is not the heart of God. That is not the nature of God. We have to stop allowing one experience of one person to shape the whole body of Christ. People say, I don't go to church no more because I got hurt in church. Right. Well, there's those same people are at the mall. Those same people that hurt you are at the grocery store. They're everywhere you go. You can't let someone that hurts you stop you from living the life that God created you to live.
And even from that perspective, that's that negative thoughts that you've experienced. So guess what you're doing when that happens? Now you're the initiator of the rejection because of your own experiences. And that's, I won't say it's okay. It's understandable. Doesn't make it okay.
It explains it, but doesn't excuse it.
So you have to be mindful that when you are the initiator of the rejection towards something or someone else, just like you mentioned it from the church's perspective, well, I'm done with them. I'm out, and those types of things. Well, you may be out, but while you're being out, it's also doing damage to you, because now you have set up a standard disconnected, but you have set up a standard that now something or someone else has to live up to your standard. Now, and when they fail to accomplish that or fail to live up to that, what do you do? And if you're on that initiator end, it brings a different perspective to where I felt rejected, or I felt like this is what happened to me.
So you're gonna give it to somebody else.
So I'm going to be the initiator. That's something that you have to think about when you're talking about rejection, because when we are talking about it in this context and even in our relationships, that is so pivotal to the mindset that you have, because when you do that, it is going to do damage to you in the long run.
Because a part of it is that while rejection can be protection, rejection is painful. You know, it makes you feel hurt and sad and alone. And it's human nature that when we feel that way is to go into ourselves. It's so important that when that happens is to do the opposite of that. Because if you look at people who when Elijah was little, Carmela would say, hey, we fall down, we get up. And so I think we need people around us to remind us when we fall down, we get up. And I'm all about encouraging and being there for you. But one of the things me and Gil were talking about this today, I don't go into tunnels. I just don't. I will stand on the outside of the tunnel of your life or whatever you're going through, cheering you on and trying to get you out. But you got to be careful that when people are negative or people are hurt, that you don't begin to be around that so much that it becomes familiar or normal to you. Because it's not healthy to tear people down. It's not healthy to make people feel bad. Even if you know, it's like, well, I'm just passionate. Or I'm just, I just have a strong personality. All of those are excuses for not being willing to examine yourself and realize there's a lot of things that I did when I was 7 that I can't do when I'm 55 years old. We got to be able to grow and mature and change our mindset and self-care. And self-care is not feeding yourself. Self-care is not shopping yourself. Self-care is not using pornography. All those things. There's a difference between self-care and medicating your pain. You have to be careful that you don't begin to self-medicate versus really heal, and let some people into your life that you know love and care about you, even if they're not a part of your everyday life. God has put someone in everyone's life that can be encouraging to them, that can bring life to them.
And we're talking about, if you're just joining us, if you're just checking in with Gil and Renee from the Rich Relationship Refuge, we're talking about thank you, rejection.
Thank you.
Sounds crazy, but there's things that you should be thankful for when it comes to rejection, because it is an opportunity for you to gain perspective and gain growth and acknowledge some of your pain and do some self-care and learn from it and grow from it and get a support system. We're trying to do things a little bit different than these and this particular podcast, video, YouTube concept, everything. Not just be so much about teach, talk. We're trying to give you these things, these actionable things that are actually reality things when it comes to your relationships. Because when we started doing the podcast and we started doing the videos, our goal was to do some re-engineering of our 35-year marriage, to say, you know what, let's break this thing apart and share with people the things that we have learned and we have gained. Because you'll find that it's the little things that you may have great habits and that you take for granted, that you just practice every single day, that will be pivotal in epiphany, in a light bulb moment for other people to say, that's what I've been missing. So that's what our motivation is for when we do these videos or these live sessions, because it's always about bringing value to you in your relationships. But the only way you can get that value is by bringing on new information, and or even the information that you already know, seeing it from a different perspective.
And being challenged to do it. Because I think it's important to have people who walk alongside you, because I think in this day and age, so many people are so busy and so in constant movement that they don't have a safe place that they can go. And that's what Rich Relationship is. It's a refuge. It's a safe place, because we want to make sure that the things that we do know and that we are learning from, that we can share that. Because so many times, especially it seems like now, people don't want to be old. I don't want to be 20. I want to be 55. If I could be another age, I would want to be 55. And so the Bible says the older women are supposed to teach the younger women how to be good wives. And so to me, I feel like as a wife, I think it's important to share the things that I have learned and I'm learning, and help somebody else along the way. So instead of you having to go through what I went through, you can learn from it if you can become a good listener.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the tunnel? This is about being around people who have gone into a dark place when they have feel or felt or experienced a level of rejection?
Well, I call it the tunnel because when I think of a tunnel, I think of it, you can't see, you can't, it's like everything is just focused on that area. And I think we all, like I have, when I'm doing the project, I have tunnel vision,
Hmm.
but I don't go into a tunnel. I think when I think of a tunnel, I think of it as a dark place where people go into isolation. And unfortunately, the people in the tunnel all have the same problem. And so, in order to get some help, you got to go outside the tunnel. I think a tunnel is something you should go through and not live in. And so, I think that a tunnel is a part of your life that you're supposed to be going through. And some people decide to live in there.
Hmm.
And so, I don't go into tunnels.
And when you experience, just like Renee is talking about it from a tunnel perspective, sometimes people will call it a traumatic event or
Mhm.
trauma
Yeah.
or those types of things. It has a lot of different words for it right now, but when you boil it all down, it still comes back to rejection.
Yeah. And there's a difference between being told no and rejection. And I think sometimes we don't understand that just because you tell someone no, that doesn't mean you're rejecting them.
Mhm.
It's a matter of understanding that rejection is more personal. It's not really about an exchange. It's more about the person. It's you're rejecting the person, not so much. And it could be their values, it could be their beliefs, and you can reject someone's beliefs and not reject the person. And so I think that we need to really ask when we're saying that we're being rejected, is it really rejection or are we just being told no? Because it seems like now when you don't agree with someone, everyone is up in arms because you're rejecting them and you're coming for them. And it's like, no, I just don't agree. It's like I can say no. And so, yeah, no is still a whole sentence and you can say no. But there's a difference between rejecting someone and saying no to them.
Sometimes rejection is all about perspective, and it's
Mhm.
all about choice, and it's all about preference. And that has nothing to do with you.
Mhm.
Whether you're trying to go and do something, whether it's a job, whether it's a person, you're trying to establish a relationship with a person. If you're just meeting this person and they say, nah, no, thank you. You go out, you approach someone from a relationship perspective. You approach somebody that you find attractive or you see and you want to make a connection with them and you approach them and they go, no, no, thank you. Or they reject you. Guess what? That doesn't mean you're worthless, you're useless.
Right.
There's all these, we can go from 0 to 100
Really
real quick. All this person did was say, no,
No,
thank you. They don't know anything about you. You didn't even get to the name
And
part
you're making
yet.
it personal and they don't like you
Well,
and they hate you.
And that goes back to the mindset.
Yeah.
If you already have these negative thoughts that have permeated and become taken root into your mind, the very next time somebody rejects you, you take it to a level of personal to where now all of a sudden, just like me in that test, I'm worthless, I'm useless, I can't do anything right. We go to 100. It's not.
Yeah. Just like we are not the good things we do, we're not the bad things we do.
Not the sum
Because
total.
who we are is who we are in Christ. And what you do is not who you are, it's just what you do. And so I think that we need to understand that our value, our purpose, our identity does not come from our behavior and our skill sets. It comes from our obedience and our relationship with God. And so I think when we see life through the lens that, you know what, this is a part of life. I mean,
Rejection is a part
it's
of
a part
life.
of life. It's like,
Mhm.
you're going to experience rejection. You're going to be hurt. You're going to be disappointed. When you go into life expecting it, when it happens, one, you're not surprised. And two, the more it happens, the more you can become resilient. And the next time it happens, where the first time it happens is devastating. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't get up. But each time you should get a little bit stronger and a little bit more resilient and be able to recover a little bit faster, because life is it's ongoing. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And so I think that it's important that when we approach life understanding that I'm going to get rejected, I'm going to be disappointed,
Mhm.
I'm going to get hurt. And guess what? You're going to hurt someone. You're going to reject someone. You're going to disappoint someone. And so when you know that you're capable of doing what has happened to you, then it makes you understand that I'm going to give this person some grace.
Got another takeaway for you. When you have experienced a level of rejection, take a minute breathe, and then get back out there. That's what I did when it came to the test. Yeah, I failed the test 3 times. I told him, you can rewind a little bit, and I gave a little analogy about how I failed 3 times. Well, you got to go back out there. You have to try again. You have to apply again. You have to make another approach to that person. You have to take that test again.
Yeah.
Just get up and go do it again. Try it again. Because if you don't, it's going to be more difficult for you to get up when you do experience that rejection. It's just like going to the gym and working out. The more you work out, the stronger you get.
Right.
When you don't work out, you get lethargic, you get lazy, you get weaker. It's just like a muscle. Yeah. Same thing, your rejection muscle. Once you actually have been rejected and you say, you know what, that's not me. That's not the measuring stick of who I am as a person. Just means they said no. Yeah. I wasn't their preference. Right. I wasn't their choice. I wasn't their selection. That's okay. Then guess what? Go do it again. Go try it again. Get back out there.
And we're not talking about an arrogance of pride and the other person is not valuable, so you don't care what they think. We're just saying have a proper perspective that we all have a source. God is all of our source. So you can't be someone's source and someone can't be your source. We're all on level playing ground. And so it's just important that we understand that everything that happens to us doesn't necessarily, sometimes it's happening through you and not to you. And we see everything as, oh my gosh, because the enemy wants you to believe that you're the only person that's ever gone through this and you are so unique and this never happened to anybody else. There's nothing that we have gone through or we're going to go through somebody else not already gone through. That's why it's important to have people in your life, because there's someone in your life that is where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. Find those people that can be where you want to go, or, support you, encourage you, motivate you. And to me, I just think you should understand that the more you try to do something new and the more you try to grow and mature, the more rejection you're going to experience.
It's just a part of the nature of the beast.
Yes.
The more success you go for, you're going to get, the higher up you go, it's going to be more challenging the higher you go.
And I don't believe that it's lonely at the top. I believe that there's lots of room at the top. And what's at the top is who you take with you. And so when you live your life thinking about relationships and understanding that rejection is protection and that you're going to go through it, and it's going to hurt and it's going to be difficult and it may make you cry, it may make you want to stay in the bed for a day. And that's okay. You can stay in the bed for a day, but you can't stay in the bed for a week or a month, because the longer you get into the feeling of rejection and it puts you into isolation, the harder it's going to become normal for you to let people in. One of the things I talked about was to love like you've never been hurt. It's like, oh, that sounds so hard. I should not blame Gil for what happened to me as a child. I need to give him the opportunity to meet the new version of me every day. We have to let the people who are meeting us not see or be affected by the pain of our past, because we unpacked it and we're dealing with it. Rejection is the same way. We have to not go into every relationship expecting that they're going to reject you, but understand that it could happen. But if you allow yourself to be afraid of being rejected, you're going to end up alone. And so rejection is a part of life. It's a part of everything we do.
And one thing before we sign out, we were talking about this and it made me start thinking about it. And we always try to, if you watched us or listened to us or been on the podcast, being a believer and follower of Jesus Christ is our foundation. And Romans 8:28, that was something that always gets me through when I feel a level of rejection. And when you feel that, if you rely on the word to actually motivate you and empower you and encourage you, those things will always seem a little bit smaller. It will put things in perspective really, really quick. 8:28, we have a plan. We always think about it from a perspective of, this is something that I want to do. Well, sometimes my plans may not line up with God has planned for me. And when I get in line with his plan more than the plan that I have, you'll figure out that those things that are what I feel were rejection were a part of the original plan that is to guide me to something better that he has for me. And if you want to think about it in that perspective, in that ideal now, because it will change your whole dynamic of it. Won't make it about you. It's going to make it about the plan that he has for you.
And I think I love that God's word, you can read it every single day for all of your life, and it's going to always be different because it's growing. It's alive. And so as you grow and mature, you see things that you didn't see before as you grow and mature. And I think that in the beginning, the thing I love about God is that he tells you up front, many are the afflictions of the righteous. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He gives all the bad stuff up front. He doesn't deceive us. And so for us to think that we're going to go through life and everything's going to be wonderful and everything's going to be great, that's not realistic. But we also don't have to be mean. We also don't have to be vindictive. We also don't have to be nasty. We also don't have to be short. We can be kind and show love and empathy. And I believe, to me, that is the true fruit of having a relationship with God. And I think that's what makes our marriage the way that it is, because we both approach each other through the love of Christ. It's not just Gil is amazing, Renee's amazing. It's Romans 12 says, present yourself to God, living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. We do that every day. And so there's things we have to do every day to make our relationships what we want them to be.
And so that's what we wanted to talk to you guys about when it comes to rejection tonight. But I'm looking here and I see in the chat that somebody puts it up here. How do you face the shame of rejection? Building the whole you. Thanks for the question. We appreciate it. So how do you face the shame of rejection?
Well, one of the things that when I think of shame and rejection, just like when you have shoes, you put them together in a pair. Shame and rejection don't have to be partnered together. Shame comes from us being concerned about what other people think. And so the Bible says, when he says, there's therefore now no condemnation in those who love Christ. So I think the condemnation that we are feeling, or the shame that we are feeling, is because we're focusing on what other people think. And so when we begin to realize, you know what, who are they to give me a place so I think shame is something that we have to make a decision. Lord, I will not. I know that is not you. I know that that's the enemy, because really we're all dirt. We're clay. So he puts his treasure in earthen vessels. So for us to be shamed, it means our focus is too much on us and not on the fact that we're just page turners. We're just vessels. And so I think that shame is something that we have to address that. Somebody can't put shame on you. They can give it to you, but again, no thank you. So I hope that helped. Does that answer your question?
No. Building the whole you. Thank you for the question.
I hope that answered your question. So we have to realize that people can put things on us if we let them. We don't have to allow shame to be a part of something that controls us. And I think sometimes you can feel ashamed or embarrassed. And I think those two are partnered, shame and being embarrassed. But it still goes back to, am I focusing on me, or am I focusing on the greater good? Because we're all going to do stuff wrong.
And I think about the shame I used the test earlier while we were talking about it. While Renee was answering the question, I was embarrassed. I can't necessarily say I felt shame about something that I was trying to accomplish. I was more embarrassed because that was something I put on myself. I was embarrassed because I think I was doing that self-talk that we were talking about earlier. I was telling myself these are the things that I should be embarrassed about. I was doing some negative self-talk. And that's where I can see how that can roll into and become how I can feel shame, which is basically just embarrassment about something. Well, when I had to change my mindset, I had to change some of the things that we already talked about tonight, that I had to get a different perspective about who I was and what I was trying to accomplish and what I was doing. That helped me understand when it comes to shame, like Renee said with the scripture, there's no shame.
Yeah.
For
no
those
condemnation.
Who are, yeah.
Condemnation does not come from God. Shame does not come from God.
That's man.
That's man.
Yeah.
And it's ourself. And it's the enemy. And so when you feel certain things come into your heart, you can automatically say, okay, I know that's not God. So where is it coming from? And then you have to really ask yourself, Gil has helped me to do this. I keep asking why. Why do I feel ashamed?
Mm-hmm.
What am I ashamed of? Well, what am I? And one of the things that I love that Andy Stanley says, everything that you do in the dark is going to come to the light. So really, every secret you think you have, it's not going to stay a secret. And so when you live your life knowing that eventually everyone is going to know everything about you, it frees you up to be human.
Right.
You know, we don't have to have it all figured out.
You know, we are very, very hard on ourselves.
We are.
Than even what most people can be on us, because we are with ourselves 24/7. So we're thinking things, we're thinking negative
and people
things,
who love you are not thinking that.
Then you know what I would say about feeling that shame? Give yourself some grace, give yourself some compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be so hard on yourself about something that you may have made a mistake about. When you think about it from that perspective, I think it will change the view that you may have of it. Mm-hmm. So thanks for the question. Thanks for the comment.
Hope that answer. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can put them in the chat. And we will answer them.
So we're looking at the chat. That's what I'm looking at. So
and we would like, if you guys watch this later, if you subscribe to our channel, please put subscribe in the feed. We've gotten to 200,000 views. Thank you guys so much. We're at 1,900 subscribers.
That's a lot to us.
That's like, we are like amazed.
We know, y'all know it. You out there and you see people that got millions and hundreds of thousands.
It feels like
and all that kind of
stuff.
Well, you know what? I love all 1,900 of those people, because you think about it, if you were in an auditorium and you put 1,900 people in there and you're talking, they come to hear what you have to say. Wow,
that's a lot. So
that's a lot to me.
We love you guys.
Thank you.
And so for the new people who subscribe, please put subscribe in the in the feed. This episode, half of this episode will be up on Sunday. And so I appreciate you guys who are here with us live every Friday. We love you. You guys are sowing into our lives, and we pray that we are sowing into yours, your marriages, and to your life as men and women. Because if you don't get to know who you are as an individual, you definitely can't know who you are as a couple. And so just spend some time this week, just thinking about how God can use something that's negative for your good.
So we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. We love you guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Next Friday.
So
love you guys. Thank you so much. If you guys have questions, put them in the feed. We'll answer it. If you guys have a topic you'd like for us to talk about, please put that in there too. Our email is richrelationshiprefuge@gmail.com, and the website is richrelationshiprefuge.com, and that's our handle on all social media platforms. We love you, and thanks for being the best part of our community.
Thank y'all. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.